How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're skipping ahead, so these repairs, one on the rail and one on the nose, are actually already completed, but we're going to look at blending paint jobs. So we're sort of blending our colour, even if it's not a perfect match, into the original colour of the board. So as per normal with a repair like this, once the repair's been done, I've started sanding it at about 120 or 240, then gone to 240 in this kind of area, 320 basically where you can see the paint has been removed, then a 400 until about here, and then I've gone with a 600 to about here. We can see it a little better here, so basically where the paint's removed to about this pencil line is 320, then I'm going 400 in this sort of area, and then 600 in this big area. We want to give ourselves plenty of room to be able to spray this whole area, not only blending our colour in, but we need to account for our clear coat as well, and the amount of space the clear coat's going to take up. So the only areas we want to mask in a paint job like this is along the pinstripe kind of area, where there's a change in colour from blue to white or blue to a pinstripe, but everything else is going to be left open and free. We don't want any masking tape edges in a paint job like this, aside from obviously a colour change like that pinstripe. So same thing down on the rail here, we've put our masking tape on that pinstripe, but underneath we're open and free. Same thing on the nose, we're masked up on that pinstripe, but once we go underneath the board there's no masking tape, so we're going to have no edges. A blue like this is going to have pretty good coverage, so we're not going to lay down a primer or a white or a black first. We should be able to cover this area of damage with our blue. If the colour was an orange, a yellow, or red, something with really bad coverage, then we might have to paint a primer layer like a white or a black depending on the colour first. So we always do a test spray just to make sure that it's not coming out all splotchy out of the can or the gun if you're using a gun. And then our first goal is to hide just the damage. Depending on your colour, it might take a couple of coats. We don't want to load it up super heavy, but we just want to start to cover the area that we're trying to hide. Same on the bottom side, flip the board over and just trying to cover those areas that we really want to hide. Not worrying about blending for this first coat, and again, depending on the colour, you might need one more of these because we're going fairly light, but with this one I feel like we're going to get away with it. So we've let that first coat kick off for about 5 or 10 minutes. You can still see a little bit of where we sanded for the repair, but the next coats are going to fix that, no worries. So we're going to start by doing the same technique, but we're going to paint further to about here, remembering our repair is about there. But as we move from our repair out to here, we're going to move our can further away from the board to start to feather that paint out. So it's going to be quite heavy up where the repair is, and it's going to get lighter as we move towards the end. Same technique on the bottom side, we're going to be pretty heavy here, but as we move up the board, we're going to keep our paint lighter, move the can further away as we move up, and that's going to blend our paint. So starting with the rails and the edges always, just so when we do this flat part, we cover that overspray from doing the rails, going pretty heavy in the beginning, and then as I move up the board, the can's going to move further away from the board, so we're lightening our paint coats as we move up, allowing these two colours to blend together. After about 5 or 10 minutes, once this is tacked off, we're going to repeat the process but move our blend a little bit further up to about there. Once those two coats have been applied, exactly the same thing with clear coat, but we're going to lay it on pretty heavy the entire time, so we're not going to move the can away that much from the surface. So we're pretty heavy here, laying it on nice and wet. We're going to continue to lay it on pretty heavy as long as we're going over colour that we've actually sprayed. Once we get beyond our colour, we can lighten off a little bit, but it'll mainly be up to the sandpaper to remove that edge. So remembering that when the repair was finished, we sanded it 120, 240, 320 on the machine, then we took it outside, we sanded it with 320 wet, 400 wet, 600 wet, and that prepped us for painting. So the only sandpaper scratches left on the entire board are going to be 600 wet. Here I'm sanding with 800 wet, so I want to flatten out my paint as much as possible and transition those 600 wet scratches into 800. And as I do that, I'm going to be removing the line where we stopped spraying our clear, and that's going to help blend everything into the original paint job. So now we can apply a bit of polish. The only thing we've got to polish out is our sanding marks, which is 800, and they should be reasonably easy to remove with the buff. So with 90% of boards we'd be done, but this one's a little bit trickier. It's hard to tell on the camera, but the original finish on the underside of this board is to a sanded finish, and then when the rails start, the rails and the deck are all to a polished finish. So now we're going to take the board back outside and we're going to sand the entire underside of the board with 800 wet, from nose to tail, just so we've got a nice consistent finish, but being really careful not to wrap the rails with that sandpaper so that we keep the rails nice and glossy after our polish, but the underside is going to be that same sanded finish. While my colour match on this job was far from perfect, using this blending technique, everything blends in together well, and we've tapered out our paint from the original paint. So to the naked eye, it's almost impossible to tell where our paint finishes and the original paint starts. And that was the last job I did before buggering off to Hawaii for a couple of weeks. So you're not going to get a video of a repair for another 2 to 3 weeks at least, I would say. I've got some work waiting for me when I get back, so we'll definitely post some of that once it's done, but yeah, that's going to be a few weeks away at least. Until then guys, I hope that video helped you out a bit. Hope you got a painting project you can utilise it on coming up, and yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you're all well. We'll see you in the next one. Chee-hoo!